Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Ian, the part-time Dungeon Master. Welcome back to the Dungeon Master Quarter. I've got the one and only, the mastermind behind Roll High, Don't Die, the OneCritWonder himself. Welcome to the channel.
How's it going, sir? I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate your agreeing to this, considering how manic things have been. But nonetheless,
Life's a little crazy, yes, but I do try to give myself a break by talking about the things I love instead of running around crazy all day and not having any fun.
yeah. And it's pretty good, to take a break from all the seriousness to talk about our hobbies and everything. Uh-oh.
I'm glad that I've been able to keep it a hobby instead of turning streaming and running games and stuff into a job. I like that I still have a day job, so as crazy as my day job can make me, like I I like that our RPGs are still just something I do for fun, at least.
Oh, definitely. I think I'd go crazy if I tried to turn this into a job. Because, don't get me wrong, doing it as a hobby and on YouTube and here on Twitch now has definitely been interesting and great. But I have a full-time job, and that's maddening enough.
Yeah, like not at all downplaying the folks that are able to turn it into a full-time job. I mad respect you and like awesome. Like the fact that you can do it. It's just not something that fits into my like life plan right now. And with everything else I got going on, like I said, yeah, I do the streaming, yeah, I do YouTube, I have fun making puns and stuff on Twitter, but the fact that I can just like relax, run some one shots, hang out with people that I like, and just not worry about, man, is my stream getting enough content that like I will be able to eat this month? Like I'm glad that I'm not part of the struggle.
Yeah, I've met a few people who are a part of that struggle, and I'm always curious as to, like, how do you do it? How do you put content out there so constantly to where you're not afraid of, like, I'm not doing good enough for my viewers, or I'm not producing something that's actually good. That's my fear, at least.
I think that's one of the things I really like about how I'm doing it right now. I get to do a trial run and like I said, not have to worry about the bills. And I'm learning Photoshop. I'm learning how to do OBS things. I'm learning Roll20 and what works and what doesn't works with the stream, what kind of content people like and stuff like that, while still having that safety net. And then when I get going, I'll be safer.
Definitely. And I, I'm kind of the same with that. I think I want to focus more on what we're talking here and what you've definitely done with Roll High, Don't Die, getting other Dungeon Masters on and having sort of like a network of people together to not only create content, but also assist others with more in-depth D&D stuff that's just behind the scenes or more behind the screen that goes into creating these things versus here's me playing it and that's it.
That's one thing as well. Like I have fun running my one shots. I had fun streaming my online Reddit game, but the purpose of those things has always been for me to have fun playing, not for like we don't cater to the stream necessarily. I haven't yet taken things to a level where throwing in bits or doing subscribing to the channel or anything like affects the game. I'm still very much just playing D&D, and I happen to have, for all intents and purposes, a camera pointed at us while we do it. But the stuff that I want to work towards and focus on as far as a like channel content has always been that like conversation starters, which is where Roll High Don't Die kind of came from. I like doing the polls on Twitter and just seeing what people have going on in their games and how they're running stuff and how they do things. And then I really kind of got into this mode after the RPG a day last year, and the getting online once a day and making a quick 5 minute blurb and answering a topic or a question about RPGs was just something I really enjoyed. So that's what moved me into Roll High, Don't Die. Here's a topic, here's a question, here's my thoughts or my answer on that, passing it off to the viewers and just jump starting the conversation to see what other folks are doing in the hobby.
I think I would say that's honestly kind of how I started with my stuff, which is the D20 Sunday, which has always been a staple of my channel, is that I originally wanted to do stuff that's like, here's a certain part of the game that, I found and I wanted to expand the conversation or the thought process, to get more creativity thinking about. And other parts, it became just like, hey, here's a story from one time we had a bit of fun. And I feel like getting the conversation going at times is hard because not everyone wants to voice themselves as they're afraid of their situation or how they interpret it is considered wrong or how other people might criticize. I've definitely noticed that on Reddit and some of the subreddits. It's not all the most gentle of places.
I'm part of a DM collaboration group, basically. You may have seen me tweet about it. It's the Notorious DMG, and what it is myself and several other lifetime GMs or forever GMs who all kind of banded together, and we figured, oh hey, if we're all always stuck being the GM, but we all have experience in a lot of different systems, this will be a chance where we can kind of just rotate and play 3 or 4 sessions of, one person running Zweihander, one person running Star Wars, and we'll see more than just like, okay, well, our individual circles only want to play, mine wants to play D&D, yours wants to play, Zweihander, yours wants to play D&D 3.5. So this will not only let us collaborate, but we'll get more systems involved, and every single person in that channel all has like a love-hate relationship with Reddit because I've never had like too much of a harsh reaction to anything I've ever done on Twitter or YouTube or anything else. I normally get some pretty constructive comments even when I suck, but like a lot of times just going, hey, here's a thing that I did. I don't know what it is, whether it's time of day or what, where Reddit goes from like, hey, this is really cool, I want to do something like that, to like, screw you and your self-promoting. Like, there's a fine line on Reddit, and it really depends on what sub you're in, and I guess what part of the world is awake at that time or what. So
I will agree that there are definitely some peak posting hours, because I've posted like my D20 Sundays. I'll post up there. And on some days, if I get it at the right time, like I'll get a lot of, upvotes and a lot more views. If I'm late that day, I don't get as many. So that much I understand. Like, there are peak posting times. But at the same time, I think that some people on the internet are just hateful. I guess they feel much safer on Reddit than they do somewhere else. I'm not sure, because I've gotten backlash on Reddit for it's like, rule checking. Not the same as rules lawyering, because rules lawyering is like, I'm going to argue with you about the rules. Rules checking is more of like, hey, just to clarify, is this the rule that we're following, or is there something different? Because homebrew rules happen. You even mentioned yourself, everyone has a different system that they like, and sometimes they try to bring rules over from, say, Zweihander over into 3.5 or 5.
I had that happen the other day because I was watching one of the other GMs in Notorious DMG, the guy that runs the Defenders of Kobold channel. I was watching them play 4E, and it's been a minute since I messed with 4E at all, so as I was watching the stream, it was kind of fun for me to be like, oh, they're trying to use blank ability and they're not sure how it works. So I was like looking stuff up just for fun, like, burn me if you must, but I enjoyed tinkering with 4E, and it's actually the system that I use to get the wife into RPGs and all kinds of other stuff. And then the very next day, I went to try and GM my 5E game, and I was messing up stuff because I was like, oh yeah, this is how surprise rounds work. Wait, no, that's 4E. I haven't played 4E in a decade, and I looked at the books for like 20 minutes. How am I messing up? Like, dang it, brain.
I fully understand it, because I still every now and then drop back to 3.5 and Pathfinder, because those were my big openers into the D&D.
Same
Well,
here.
not
I got
the not the big openers, but more recent openers.
Yeah, I got started in the middle of third edition and got really going in 3.5. And then the system I've probably played the most is actually Pathfinder. D&D 5e might be catching up now, but Pathfinder is, if not my most played game, it's been my longest ongoing campaign. I've had a longer running 5e group, but we would get up to like level 12 or so and then start a new game. We were running the official modules, so most of them run to like level 12 and then stop. And each time we got to the end of the module, rather than going into homebrew, we just started a new module because it was fun to like kind of rock out all the 5e modules. But the Pathfinder game was a homebrew game, and we got to much higher level, and it was a years long campaign.
Ooh, I would really like a years long campaign at some point. Actually, I think I just recently got that with the Surskin campaign. Or it might be getting close to 2 years.
I was gonna say I catch bits and pieces of it here and there, but how long has your game been running?
Oh God. Um, that's a good question. I still need to post up session 16. I fully edited and finally finished editing it like 2 weeks ago, and I just haven't uploaded it yet. Problem is like took a small break due to holidays, the Christmas holidays, and because we had another player join us who's also the dungeon master for another group that I'm in. It's kind of been like, okay, now we need to like schedule out a little bit more like how and when we get to play.
Right.
So it also doesn't help that one of my players is now in college. She's doing well for herself there. Another one of my players is, I believe, moving soon over to Estonia, and where he'll be going to college over there.
That's a random place to move to.
It's where his family from, so.
Okay, I was gonna say volunteer work or what he's studying or family.
Yeah. It's...
So, kind of topic change, I guess. But with your campaign, is it totally all homebrew, like all custom stuff you wrote, or do you draw from anything in particular?
Most of it is homebrew, but I do draw inspiration from, I would say, definitely the writings of R.A. Salvador for the Forgotten Realm. Any time that I watch, say, Discovery Channel, History Channel, a number of just random places and books that I've read and so on. But the world itself I've actually been working on for going on 16 years now.
Man, I have like a starting of a homebrew setting in works, and I tinker with it depending on what else I have going on in my life. But a lot of my one shots are in an area that is kind of sandboxy, so I let the choices of the one shots kind of build upon the lore in that chunk of the world. But I have more established things elsewhere. But even then, like, it's all stuff I've just built in the back of my mind. I haven't released the chaos that is an adventuring group into it yet, because of course, it never feels ready to me, no matter how much work I put into it. And I know if I started, I would probably do just fine. But I'm always like, oh man, I haven't done enough. Like, there's always that stage fright.
Awesome. So apparently, my nice microphone, the Blue Snowball, decided to crash. So now I'm switched over to my backup, and that's why I have a backup.
I should look into that at some point, because I'm still rocking the Amazon special $30 nothing fancy microphone.
It's very weird. It's just all of a sudden it's like it's showing it's still registered and anything, but it just decided, hey, I'm not going to work anymore. So it might be the USB port for this laptop going out, because my friend and my son have killed this thing. And I have been hooking it up to jumper cables to keep it alive, like some sort of Frankenstein monster.
I have a laptop just like that in the other room. You can't unplug it. It instantly dies because it doesn't even register there's a battery anymore. All of those kind of things. So I had to go buy a new laptop so that I would have something with me for the deployment that's coming up. and I've already loaded it up with OneNote and all of the things that I'm going to do, so that if I have time between A, being deployed, and B, continuing to work on my degree, I'm looking forward to, you know, campaign prep and world building and stuff when there's nothing to do and it's 3 a.m. for everyone else I know. So I might as well just sit in my room and catch up on podcast and work on my homebrew.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I do that already, and I'm just insomnia, but it's like I can't say, oh, I've dedicated fully all 16 years to building this world for this campaign. It's like, no, it actually started out as a book that I was trying to write, and it was awful at first. Like, I still have some of the notes from when I was like 13 years old, and I'm like, man, these are bad, and I just like, there's some good parts here and there. I'm going to keep those, but the rest of this I'm just throwing in the fire. Just, no one needs to see this ever again. And
so your homebrew world started as a book, and then what was the process there to kind of go from, single person or even multiple character but novella into like, I'm gonna let other humans get involved and like totally mess with all the stuff that I've got going on?
well, I wrote and actually finished the book 3 times. And I revised it each time, made it better each time. I had a few friends read it, and they all admitted, like, it's really good. You should, like, get an actual editor to help you, hammer out some parts, and then get it printed. But I always second-guess myself. Like, no, I don't like this. Or I'd, like, go back and read through it, and I'm like, no, I don't like this at all. And I'll just end up rewriting the whole thing because of, like, one section I don't like. So I'll just rewrite the whole. And then after starting it up for the 4th time, I realized I'm sitting on a world's worth of notes from like the different kingdoms to what the landscape is like on each of them, the deities that they worship and everything. So I'm just like, I've been playing D&D now. At this point, by the time I got to this point in writing, I was like, I'll just make it into a D&D camp. And it's worked so far.
Do you feel there was any like crazy steps that you had to do to convert the stuff you had already done for a book into D&D? Like, let me rephrase my question here. Now that you're doing, like, I'm guessing outside of the realm of the scope of the book, do you find that creating custom campaign information straight for D&D is easier, or was it easier to have written it as a book and then go, okay, I have all this lore, all these characters, all these places, I can just convert that into D&D now?
Oh,
sorry,
I think it made it easier.
The hard questions here.
No, it's fine. I think it was easier than most people think, because it's like I said, like by the time I decided to convert it over to Dungeons and Dragons, I had like the characters, their personalities, their backstories, and everything already. So all it took was, giving certain things stats, finding out if certain rules would work, and if they didn't, then I just modified them a little bit to where they would. So, and like it took a while. Don't get me wrong; it definitely took a while, but I felt like it was way easier doing it that way versus just starting from scratch.
Right. So, in terms of campaign prep now, then, like, how far ahead are you? Like, do you wait to see what the group does, and then you go, okay, you guys are here, I have a week to, like, figure some stuff out? Or do you have, like, do you got multiple paths fleshed out, and you're just waiting on them to kind of gravitate towards one before you put more work into it?
Normally, what I do is I write some key points. Like, these are the key moments in the campaign that I want to see happen. And I tend to make, like, 1 or 2 different possibilities versus, like, what I think is going to happen and what might actually happen. And then everything else in between those key points, it's more based off what my players do. And I definitely I have a rule of always write out 3 sessions ahead. So if I'm on
Right.
session 10, I'm already writing session 13 because I'm waiting, and like the closer we get to session 13, I'm going to start changing little bits of it. And I'm like, nah, okay, this didn't go as planned, so I'm going to change this a little bit, and we're going to do it this way now. So that way, I can take an account as to what my players do, while also being prepared for what's coming up. So that way, I'm not just like pulling something out my rear end on when
Yeah.
it's time to go.
Is there any particular strategies you have for having stuff prepared? Like, have you? It's a vague question, I know, but is there anything that you've found really works for like having something so that you're not having to pull stuff out like that?
Uh, like I said, always write ahead.
Yeah,
Insomnia is a great tool.
I bet. One of the things
Sleep is
that
irrelevant.
Yeah. One of the things I've started doing is I kind of just end when I'm doing a long running campaign, I end the session with okay guys, why don't you guys tell me what kind of happened in this session and where you think you're going to go from here? And that does two things for me. One, it lets me know what they think is happening in the story because I can assume what their perception is, but they may have missed something, or they may totally, think that so and so's the bad guy, or those kind of misconceptions. And so I want to know what they're thinking. But on top of that, if they're like, oh well, we think we're gonna head into the swamp and start punching lizards, I can go start drawing my swamp map and get all my lizards statted because otherwise I'm like, okay, well, next session they could go into the swamp, or they could get on a boat, or they could just spend it all shopping. Like, then I have to prep 3 times as much stuff because I don't know whether they're going to pick A, B, and C. So I found that asking them and at least knowing that they're like, well, we're thinking A, but B sounds tempting, I can just like, I can have a couple of things for C just in case stuff gets squirrely, but like, I'm not wasting, if I'm doing it in person, I'm not wasting Sharpie drawing out maps that they're not even going to go to that island. And if I'm online, like I can focus my like, okay, I need art for this, I need a map for that, and like if they go totally off the rails, then we'll get into it's a blank map and you can see my great artistic skills, guys.
Oh, I've definitely been in those situations before. So and especially when I first started dungeon mastering. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to essentially have I would say I called it my quick monster book. It was literally a little like one of those pocket journals that you could stick in like your pant pocket or something. And I had quick encounters essentially written up in there based upon like what terrain my players were in. So it's like, oh, I'll just quick throw up something, description of the terrain, like if they're in a swampy area, like you said, I could quickly describe the swamp just from that note, draw it up on the battle map, and like, hey, this is what we got. And the notebook also had like page numbers in it, so that way I could quickly look up monsters.
I think
That's another thing for every dungeon master out there. Invest in bookmarks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure I could have a whole conversation on like tools that you swear by, and I was gonna say having like a small pocket notebook. I have on my uniform. I have a like ankle pocket that like a 3x6 notebook fits in perfectly. So I like just having a notebook because that thing that I think of while waiting on the bus or waiting on somebody to show up or whatever. Oh yeah, I totally remember that until I'm at home in front of my computer and I don't remember that thing. So having a notebook on me like really helps. But also voice recorders are awesome, even if it's just an app on your phone. Because I have like a 30-minute commute and I can't tell you the amount of daydreaming of sweet D&D things I wasted the first couple of months on my commute. And so I finally started like, even if it's just like 3 words, like hitting record and going, hey, remember non-combat encounters. And so when I get home, I can be like, okay, I was thinking about something, and go check my notes and be like, that's right, I need to do a roll high, don't die for skill challenges, social encounters, and non-combat challenges. So like, bam.
Yeah, and those kind of encounters are just as important as actual combat encounters too. because it adds a bit of variety to the whole play style of the campaign itself.
Right, and obviously
Excuse me.
there's people out there that like they play D&D to roll dice and hit stuff, and you know your barbarian character might not necessarily enjoy all the talking to the king's, you know, messenger or whatever. But I feel like there's certain systems that do them really well, and I feel like they can be great story devices as well as good pace setters. Like if you go hard all the time with crazy combat encounters are going to stop being as crazy because this is now the norm. But if you can work it in there well and not end up with like a Phantom Menace episode where everyone's like, okay, I'm getting a bunch of backstory, but like, when's the lightsaber fight gonna happen? Oh, sweet lightsaber fight! Like, good pacing is important, but I think like, especially if you can mix a skill challenge into like a combat, and I don't want to get too far down that road because I could rant about it forever. But
I do like how you brought up the Phantom Menace because I actually didn't like that movie. As a Star Wars fan.
That was kind of my point because I too Star Wars, but like, you know,
I hate Jar Jar Binks. I hate the entire Gungan race. They are unnecessary.
But just imagine Star Wars as an RPG campaign, and you started in, you know, episode 4, and you had some, you know, Return of the Jedi kind of pacing, and you're like, all right, high point, let's get our next adventure started. And then the DM was like, and here's the new NPC that will be following you along, Misa Jar Jar Binks. What?
As I stated to one of my players one time when they threatened to make a character like Jar Jar Binks in one of my campaigns, that's a stabbing offense. So,
just skip all the other steps and go straight up to stabbing. I will shank you at the kitchen table.
And they're like, you wouldn't, and it's like, and I have this old trench knife that was given to me by a Vietnam veteran when I was like 10. He was like, hey, you know, I've got a present for him. I'm like, really, what? And he's like, here's the trench knife that saved my life. I'm like, oh, okay. 10 years old with a big old knife. I'm like, okay, this is mine now. This is awesome.
I will not admit to how many knives I had at 10 because I too grew up in the middle of kind of the South rural area, and I can't tell you how many things I just traded for knives or just acquired because somebody showed up and they're like, check out this thing. I got you one too. Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, for a long time I kept that in my backpack, and it's like I just pull it out and like, you want to test? But I never stabbed anyone because I was like, no, I like you, but seriously, don't bring evil into my campaign.
Sometimes the threat of stabbing can be more effective than the actual stabbing. Saved you from the Jar Jar, if nothing else.
But it did not save me from Steve. Hashtag fuck you, Steve.
Ooh, Steve has his own hashtag.
It, from my first videos that I ever did on Dungeons & Dragons on my YouTube channel, there's a 3-part video because I couldn't upload more than 15-minute videos just yet. Yeah. So it was just one huge, like, altogether, like, 40-ish rants of how this one guy almost ruined D&D for me to where I almost did not want to ever Dungeon Master or play again. And because I didn't want to say his actual name, I just called him Steve. So I just said, fuck you, Steve. And it just kind of stuck. So every now and then my players, they'll remind me of it, and they'll say, you know, in the chat, hashtag fuck you, Steve.
The only hashtag that my games have really created so far is, I don't know if you caught my last, no, it was the one before last one shot. I had the GM of Proficient with Skulls. I had 1 in 20 D&D. I had the GM of Legends Die Live. I had my wife, and I had Goblin Nobility from Twitter. And like, they're all kind of like goofy and fun, and like, they started talking like, we're going to make this a crazy, like, let's see how much we can annoy, you know, OneCritWonder kind of game. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And it actually ended up being a really great one-shot. Like, it's definitely in my, you know, top 5 for the random Twitter one-shots that I've run. But
definitely if Goblin Nobility is there.
Yeah. About 20 minutes into the game, they were like talking to a farmer, and Goblin Nobility started like messing with a chicken in the background. And Mike, the DM for Legends Die Live, he was playing. It's actually an NPC from their stream, and he's a high elf. He's a high elf wizard who smokes a lot of like pipe weed and loves playing with illusions. So he started making illusions so that uh, Grackle Goblin's character was like talking to a chicken, and they adopted this chicken. They stole this chicken from the farmer that they were trying to save, and they headed off into the swamp with this chicken and proceeded to, through various shenanigans, basically start a chicken-based cult in that particular region. And so Lord Cluck Cluck is now a meme in my Discord, and hashtag Lord Cluck is now a hashtag I get hit with once in a while.
Lord Cluck. I'm gonna keep that in mind.
Yeah, so just imagine a tiny halfling barbarian, a high off his ass high elf illusionist wizard, a goblin fighter, a tiny rage lady. Did I say halfling barbarian already?
Yeah.
Yep. Who else did we have? We had a crotchety old grandpa druid and a Irish drinking halfling ranger. And they were running through a swamp with a goblin holding a chicken above his head, and off on an adventure they went. And, they ended up saving the day and beating some bandits and stopping the lizard folk attacks on the town and stuff. But they did all of it, like, with a chicken.
I've only once started a religion in D&D, and that was by accident. What edition was it? I want to say it was 2nd edition. I think it might have been 2nd edition. It was a long time ago, back when I first started playing D&D. I was playing with a bunch of old Navy, and my thief got caught by a bunch of goblins. And I'm like, wait, don't sacrifice me, don't kill me. My god will be severely displeased with you. They're like, well, who's your god? I'm like, Bob, the god of crunchy bugs, not the soft one. And somehow I succeeded in convincing them that Bob, the god of crunchy bugs, not the soft ones, was real. And that spread from one goblin tribe to another goblin tribe to another goblin tribe, to where they all started worshipping Bob, the god of crunchy bugs, not the soft. To where, like, several sessions down the line, a critical spear would have killed me, but a wall of crunchy bugs came out of nowhere and stopped the spear. And I sat there for a moment. I'm like, wait, crunchy? Oh, son of a!
The DM
the
got
paladin. The DM got me, and the paladin was furious with. Like what?
I've never started a religion. I've had like fake cleric characters who pretended to be religions, whether they were like accepted religions or pretended to be like an off the beaten path kind of thing. I've had some very superstitious characters, but I've never had anyone that like invented anything, whether it got a following or not. But I was in a Tomb of Annihilation game where we ran into he was a gnome barbarian, and he thought he was a cleric, but he was a barbarian. But in his mind, he was a cleric, and it was his own internal voice that's what he worshipped, basically. So the voice in the back of his head, which talked like Macho Man Randy Savage, by the way, was the god. Yep, that was the god that he prayed to every morning because he swore he was a cleric. But like on his character sheet, he was a barbarian, and the god he worshipped was just his internal monologue, like the voice in the back of his head. That character lasted 3 hours. The player had a rogue die at the end of one session, and he came in probably 15-20 minutes into the next session. Like the DM diverted us off the path to meet his character. We got introduced to him, and we had a 3-hour session, and he ended that session trapped in a room. I don't want to spoil anything for Tomb of Annihilation folks, but we started the next session, and like the trap went off, and it was a 20-minute combat of him trying to figure out how to get out of that room, and he was trapped in there alone, and then he died.
Oh,
and that was that character.
Oh, that's sad though. That's an awesome character. It kind of reminds me. He wasn't an actual cleric, but he was a cleric that did not understand his own religion. He was a dwarf cleric who thought he had to help other people get into dwarf heaven. So the only way he could do that, though, was to make them into dwarves. So whenever he came up to try and convert someone, he'd always be like, "So, have you tried being a dwarf? You got the right look to you for a human, but you're a wee bit tall. If we could chop you down to make you about the right height, yeah, we can get you straight into dwarf. Squeeze you right in."
Did he ever try like any magic or anything to convert people to dwarves, or was it like a physical, like, we're gonna squash you down kind of stuff?
Kind of a physical squash you down, because like I said, the concept was sort of there, but he just misunderstood what he was supposed to do.
Nice.
And
So
it wasn't my character; it was a friend of mine's, and he's like telling me about this, and they had audio logs from when they played, and I'm sitting there listening to him, laughing in my chair at work, trying not to be heard as I'm just like shaking. And I'm just like, oh god, I'm gonna get fired for listening to an audio log, and I can't stop.
I wish I had the signal, like my building just murders cell signal and stuff, and our work computers, A, can't access all the cool stuff, but B, like I can get to YouTube, but like it might work for a couple of minutes, and so it's not really conducive with like, I'm going to watch a 4-hour RPG game. But I'm going to, not that I'll be working there too much longer, or, you know, I'll be downrange, but like I need to figure out some kind of like fancy mobile hotspot method of podcasting from the desk. Kind of related though. Our last two mini topics have kind of been about like things that derailed, like a chicken or religion and stuff like that. And one of the questions that you had sent me in the like possible topics was, how do you deal with, as a GM, when the group gets off track and kind of goes sideways? So is there any particular ways that you find yourself preparing for that on the front end, or dealing with that once you recognize that it's kind of happening? Like, do you let the party go where they're going to go, or at what point do you like start nudging things back to the story, or what?
Well, that's a good one actually, because it's one of the reasons why I don't like modules. I actually do not like modules at all, because I feel like they're too constrained. That whole, hey, you know, we're getting off track, you know, we need to get back onto the story, we need back into this and everything.
We go talk to that guy. There's nothing in the book for what that guy says. Crap. Yeah.
Yeah, but I played in Rise of the Rune Lords for Pathfinder. We never finished it because of things happened at the Dungeon Master's house in his life. A whole big schmuckle of stuff. But there was a couple of times where we kind of like started getting off track of the campaign as far as what's in the module, because we kind of agreed that like something else was a bit more present than what was taking place and what we were being told to do. And we're like, no, you know, this, yeah, it's important. What we're talking about is way more important and needs to be done right. But
right.
Module was like, no, keep the players on this path no matter what. And I hated that so much. So, especially when I started Dungeon Master, I was like, I'm not going to do a module because I don't like that. So what I do is, like, when the players start going in a new direction that is not essentially parallel or in line with the overall campaign arc that I had planned, or the whole story arc that I had planned, I let them go. I just remind them before they go, though. It's like, regardless of what you guys do, the story will continue without you. The world still turns. The world still moves on with or without your input. So if you guys abandon this quest, you may come back to it months later, and a lot has changed. Things that you cannot fix.
There was an example of that, and I forget the exact story. They were playing like Red Hand of Doom or something, but something where there was an implied timeline, like this approaching army is coming to do the thing. And it was a real good example of that, like teaching players that the world can move on without them. That, you know, if you're playing Storm King's Thunder and you spend forever heading down south and messing around with those cities, like the quests aren't just sitting there waiting on you to show up. Like if it's been 3 months, that quest giver has probably hired somebody else or something. But in this example in the back of my mind, there was, you know, you have 47 days until the orc invasion is going to happen. And the group got like super tied up on arguing with the town mayor and in like trying to change the laws of the town because of something really silly from one of the characters' backstories. And it was like great stuff. They were role playing in town and whatnot, but the DM kept kind of like reminding them like, hey, orcs. And they're like, well, we're going to mess with this. But the DM was definitely tracking days in the background. And on day 47, the orc horde showed up and they hadn't done anything because they were like, I forget what it was, something silly like trying to allow a certain breed of dog to be, owned in the town or something stupid like that. And they messed with it for a month. And then they were surprised after a month when the orcs showed up and they hadn't built walls or recruited soldiers or done anything. And so I always think of that kind of funny, like Storm King's Thunder was probably one of my favorite modules from 5e. And as you mentioned, modules aren't really your jam. They're not my favoriteest thing ever, and so I run them a little bit different. I'll read Storm King's Thunder, and I'll have an adventure that is Storm King's Thunder adjacent. And if I need to invent some stuff, I have this plot that's like working in the background, but we can be doing non-Storm King's Thunder stuff up and down the Swords Coast, and then I have an implied skeleton in the background to be like, okay, well, it's been 3 months. This is the kind of stuff that's going on, and I can dredge up some stuff if I need to. And so that's kind of how I do modules, I guess.
The most recent that I can think of that I kind of did it was in my crime campaign. I called it the crime campaign because we titled Crimes Against Sanity. And originally the players wanted to essentially be their own crime syndicate inside my homebrewed world and everything. And it was like, okay, the only problem is they're terrible at being criminal. They actually suck at it. The worst thing that they've done is so far is start a protection racket. But, that's about it. But yeah, one thing that they were doing is like, okay, while we're waiting... They're like level 1 or 2 at the time. They were like, while we're waiting for our boss to essentially get us more jobs, we're going to take jobs from the help board and the bounty board to see if, we can make money that way. And I'm like, okay. So they accepted a couple of the jobs. And one of them, they got held up on for a couple of days. And then they completely forgot about the one where they're, being bodyguards to a group of merchants that were leaving town. They completely forgot about it for weeks. And then they came back to it, and it was like, hey, we still got that one job for the merchants. And they came back, they're like, well, we were supposed to meet them at this warehouse. And when they entered the warehouse, they found all the merchants had been brutally murdered because there was no one there to protect them.
Right.
And they're like, oh, this is bad.
I think the worst in terms of consequences, not in like unfunness, but the worst consequence I've ever had for not paying attention to timeline was I was in a game where the DM legitimately had plotted out X is going to happen at 2 o'clock, blank's going to happen at 3 o'clock, and stuff like that. And it was an experiment, basically. And so I knew I was getting into an experimental game, but there was legitimately a timeline. And so what we did, to the best of his ability, would be marked against the timeline. Well, we were supposed to be in an inn, have a conversation, accept a quest, do the things, leave the inn, and go somewhere else. And he figured, the party will probably be in the inn for like an hour and a half, 2 hours doing stuff, and then they'll leave. And then about 10 minutes after that, I'm going to have the inn explode in a fireball. Well, I was a ranger, and I was like an urban bounty hunter kind of ranger. And we were all in the inn, and we left the inn, and then he described this character walking into the inn who looked kind of weird and shady, who was supposed to just give me that bad feeling vibe and then go into the inn. And so once the inn blew up, I'd be like, it was probably that guy. Well, I turned around and followed his ass back into the inn. And then the party turned around and followed us in too, like followed me in to be like, okay, well, we're not going to split the party. We'll just come back into the inn. And we were all standing in the inn at, 6:45 or whatever it is that was determined to be in explosion time. And so I led the party back into a giant explosion that we were supposed to have happen behind us as we left. And I was like, My bad, guys. You didn't have to follow me.
Don't you know the song? Don't you know you never split the party?
Yeah.
I had two of my players singing that once. It was actually with the Steve campaign. When Steve convinced two other party members to essentially, split off with everyone else because the cleric and the fighter had just got done dealing with a wraith, actually two wraiths, shadow wraiths to be precise, in broad daylight, so they had a fighting chance. They drew from the deck of many things, so like if anyone helped them, it spawned more wraiths. So they're like, yeah, we're not helping you, sorry. But the two of them were able to defeat them, and they're like, okay, both of us have like a 4 in Constitution right now, so our characters are going to go lay down for a bit, if you don't mind.
Take a nap, have a drink of water, and eat a sandwich.
Yeah. And so Steve was like, yeah, you guys, you go do that. And then he says, as soon as their characters walk away and like go up to their rooms, I pull the other two aside. And it's like, hey, we're going to go, go do the bounty board stuff with. I'm like, okay. So, I'm the dungeon master, so I'm like, okay, this is what they want.
Your funeral.
Yeah. So they end up going against, they end up taking a bounty for a gnome who was controlling a large warg and like 6 wolves. So I'm like, okay, number crunching in my head, they should be able to take this. All except for the Slayer died. Was he? Yeah, he was the prestige class Slayer for, or it might have been hybrid class for Pathfinder. He was the only one who survived, and he survived by lobotomizing the gnome with an arrow and then running away. The wizard that was his cousin, dead. The Steve, dead. And I go back every now and then. I think, number crunching wise, they should have won, but Steve was being a butt and not healing like he can, so he deserved to die. Meanwhile, the two people who were, we're gonna sit down, have a sandwich, don't mind us. They're like, oh, well, they're going to die, so we're just going to, go to the other side of the room, and we're going to play Smash. They're within earshot. They turn down the volume so that way they can hear everything, because they know what's going to happen. And one of them starts singing, don't you know you never split the party. And then the other one joins in, and so the two of them are singing that while their friends are dying. And I'm just like, man, that is rude. But
So,
they deserved it.
I guess GM question there, since we're doing GM's corner. Do you modify stuff if the party splits itself and suddenly 2 players are going to be in a fight that you expected all 5 of them or whatever to be there? Like, do you start changing stuff behind the scenes to like not totally make this a murder fest? Or if this guy and his 4 goons are raising Cain in the tavern right now and only 2 of the 5 players decide to go back to the tavern, do you let them just fight it out with what was supposed to be a 5-man fight?
I modify it a little bit, not too much. I still want it to be a challenge to them, so that way, like, the 2 of them, they're able to take on the one guy and his 4 goon, but they're going to remember that fight with the one guy and his 4 goon. It's like, yeah, we won, but it wasn't an easy fight. It would have been a lot easier if some assholes were next to us, helping.
Yeah.
But
we won, but at what cost?
What happened to you? I got my butt kicked. But no, it's like I try and modify it, not too much, but enough to where it's still a challenge, and they're still invested in the combat. And that way, when they overcome it, they're like, hey, we were able to overcome this, even though the odds were against us.
Right, like they realized that they should have been a clump. Like it was...
No, not blatantly like, we beat them no problem, but more of like, it was a hard fight, but we got it.
Yeah.
You don't want to modify it too much to where it's like taking the glory.
Right, less about the players going, oh, well, that was a CR5 fight, and we only had 2 people, but more about the actual characters going, like, hey, guys, next time we wander into that place, maybe, two of us shouldn't be shopping for candles and incense.
I had one player one time that was super big into role playing out his wizard as a obsessive compulsive wizard who must have like everything perfectly to where he like meticulously handed me shopping. And I'm like, you're killing me, man. Just you know the rule.
Yeah, take 10 gold off your sheet and you got it. Come on.
He's like, no, I need, like, he'd write out, like, weight measurements for each individual one. It was like, 0.02 grams of ginger root extract and stuff. And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna kill you. Either...
Just buy up to the next round number and be like, okay, I can do this twice.
Nope, he didn't want to do that. So have you had moments like that where you just kind of like stared at one of your players and like, I'm going to kill you? I could just feel it.
Yeah, and I'll name drop him because his name is also Steven. I feel like every game I've ever played with him as a player, like he purposely makes like either abrasive or like just like meme-y kind of characters sometimes, and I assume it's just because all of our games are casual, so it don't in your mind have like, here's our super in-depth role-playing game and this guy is bringing a like out of character, that's what she said jokes kind of character. But like I've had a couple of times where I was just like, okay, in our Star Wars game he made a character who every time he introduced himself to a new person, or at the beginning of every session, he would pick a new name for his character because he was a Shadra fan who had been around too many grenade blasts and had lost his hearing and was no longer able to actually say his name in his native tongue and stuff like that. See, I got folks in Twitch chat going, yeah, Steven makes unrelenting characters. But he does stuff where you're just like, come on, man. Like, I'm already like scrambling through the Star Wars books because this is all our first time in the Star Wars system. And I'm like trying to do stuff on the fly and make sure that y'all have a fun time. And instead of just being able to like, I shoot him with my laser gun, you're like, I'm going to wrap duct tape around a grenade and try to swing it around above my head and then stick it to the bottom of the ship. And I'm like, but dude, come on, like
I can't really say anything about that swinging the grenade around because as I mentioned to you in the past, I'm in a Star Wars fan club known as the Dark Jedi Brotherhood.
Yeah. One
of the rules for my character, because I made a joke list of rules like, hey, my character is no longer allowed to do this. One of the rules that was added by a friend, another member of the clan, was Ethan Martez is no longer allowed to use any kind of grenade other than a concussion grenade. And then shortly after that was, if you see Ethan Martez with duct tape, a concussion grenade, and a thermal detonation, run. So, because he's accidentally blown up like friendly ships on accident because it's like, I was experimenting and things went wrong. I wanted to see how fast the Corvette goes, so I put it on full throttle. Stuff like that.
I always have fun playing with Steven, and I know that I've done a couple of things too, like when he was GMing, to make him be like, oh, I gotta deal with this now. But some of his characters have definitely been like, man, come on, like it. Help me help you have fun. Like, I'm new to this system. If you were going to do some weird slingshot duct tape stuff, like, you could have been researching that in the book for the past 20 minutes instead of just being like, I'm going to do this. And he did a lot of, like, helping me with that system because he was the other person who had the book. And, it was the two of us and our wives and then a random player. And he was the other person who did a lot of the research to help the group wade into the system. But there was definitely some times where I had to be like, wait, you're going to do what? Man, I'm still working on how shooting each other works. Like, come on, man, work with me.
Oh, I definitely understand that. One of the questions I often got was like, if Steve made you almost want to quit Dungeons and Dragons altogether, why did you let him come for 3 separate campaigns? And I'm like, well, first off, I didn't invite him to the last campaign. Someone else did. Secondly, they originally were his books. So once I got my own book, I didn't invite him back. But for the first 2 campaigns, they were his Pathfinder. So I couldn't really like, hey, you're not allowed to play, or I'm kicking you out of the group because you're an asshat. Because it's like, okay, then, well, I'll just take all my books with me. So
yeah, you can't really kick the host out, or the one that has the ultimate, or whatever the top DM D&D Beyond, if that's what y'all are playing with. Like sometimes being the group healer means you don't get kicked out even in real life games.
Yeah, so there was like a lot of situations like that, and when I was finally able to get my own books, it's like I looked at the players and like, I'm not inviting them to the next campaign, and they're like, well, we don't really plan on it either. And then someone invited him because he just showed up one day with his character sheet, and he described his homebrewed character, and I'm like, okay, hold on, let me see the character sheet. And I went through it, and I checked off of it, and I explained it, because it was a hybrid class with the Pathfinder roles.
Right.
And I helped balance it back, and then like 4 sessions later, that's when he convinced the other 2 to come with him to do the bounty board, and he got everyone killed because he was an idiot. So,
as much as I like have fun complaining about it, though, like not even just him specifically, just like that kind of person, sometimes you do need bad characters or bad players so that you can, as a dungeon master or game master or whatever the appropriate title is, A, get that experience and like learn to deal with it, but B, get also the experience of steering that person back onto the right track if that's what needs to happen, or just deal with that situation of the confrontation it takes to be like, hey man, you're really putting a vibe in the group that we're not really looking for. Let's come to a compromise, or like let's part ways here. So like sometimes you need the bad experiences so that you can learn from them. And like I can't tell you the number of like really bad experiences I've had because I tend not to focus on them, but some of those real bad experiences have helped me catch stuff. Like the first session something started being a little twingy, and I can go, okay, well last time this is exactly what happened, and I can stop at a like, hey man, let's be careful how we tread going forward. And they're like, oh, I didn't even realize. And you stop something before you had that, like we split the party and then Steve started a fight we shouldn't have been in, and now everyone's pissed, and like the game breaks down because everyone loved their characters but died because the party split, or whatever. Not the best example, but like you can start seeing signs if you've had experience with bad stuff. But if you go through life always having the bestest of luck, like yeah.
And I would like to point out is Steve was one of those people that I had to have those talks with a couple of times. And when it comes down to it, whether you're the dungeon master or the game master, when it comes down, there is a point to where you have to put your foot down and be like, hey, no, we're stopping this right now. It's like, either you've had that conversation with them before and it's a recurring problem, and if it's reoccurring, then I know a lot of people don't like confrontation. I cannot speak.
Confrontation.
My job is to speak, and I cannot speak. But yes, that word. But the thing is, you have to get over it, and you have to be like, hey, enough. Stop. We're stopping this now. If you don't like it, leave. You can't stay here. You can't be a part of this group so long as you keep this up.
Yeah.
And either they get over it and they accept, or they move on. So,
such is life sometimes. And that's a thing that I've tried to explain to people. I spend a lot of time on Reddit when work's being slow or lame, or I got Reddit up on one screen to just take a break from photoshopping or campaign prep or whatever. And you see a lot of the same kind of questions, and people are like, how can I make this work? And it's a thing I always harp on. Like, the answer to like 90% of the like, I have this problem in my group type post is usually, have you talked to the person like as a human? But on top of that, like, you can still be friends with someone and not have to play D&D with them. Like, there are people who are okay with being your friend, and there are people who you can play D&D and get along with them, but like they don't necessarily need to be the same pile. You can play D&D with your hashtag fuck Steve and find out that he's an asshole and stop playing D&D with him and still play Borderlands and see him at work and go play basketball and all of those things. But just what you want out of D&D and what Steve wants out of D&D are justifiably different. And that's okay. Like, I have friends that I can play D&D with, but I could not jump on an online shooter and put up with that person just because of the way they play, and vice versa. Like, I can go, make That's What She Said jokes in Borderlands with, player X and be fine, but I would not want them, let loose in my homebrew world just to run amok because we're cool online friends, but like, we're not, play D&D for 4 hours and be subjected to what he wants to do as a character kind of people.
Oh, definitely. And I wish I had that, that kind of friendship still with Steve, but stopped playing D&D, and like we told him, like, no, we're not playing D&D with you anymore. We tried playing other games with him, like other tabletop games that we had, and it just, due to some other things that like I'm not bringing up because that's some interpersonal business going on. But it's like, okay, Steve, we're just kicking you out of the gaming group, period, because you're being that guy, and we're tired of it. But like I said, I wish I still had that friendship with him to where I'd be like, hey, you want to play Borderlands, or you want to play, I don't know, what was one of the other games we played? God, we played a number of games together, but it's just like we just couldn't play D&D together because he would do things that would aggravate me as the dungeon master. And the one time he was the dungeon master, it was terrible.
I think that there's an implied social contract that comes with RPGs that people need to be more cognizant of. So like, take 5 people and pick one of them as the GM. They might get along fine, but if you take another person and the way that they run the game, like, everyone might not necessarily have fun. So player X can have fun in player Y's game, but if player Z was running, player X might not be having fun, even though it's with all the same people. It's just the way the game is ran. And there's also certain themes. Like, I can grab 4 or 5 people from my random pool of players off of Discord or Twitter and go run a casual, like, let's make dick jokes and That's What She Said jokes and worship a chicken and have fun D&D game. But I wouldn't necessarily get those same 5 people and go play Call of Cthulhu or like a horror game where it's heavy on the drama and the role play and the mood, because somebody who's great at chicken shenanigans might not necessarily be what you're looking for in a let's be serious, let's do voices, let's set the mood and do music and all of that kind of game.
Definitely. I agree with that in the extent that there are different people for different themes. And okay, like the way I run a game, most people that they've played, they're like, hey, we really like the way you run the game. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But then I've sat in on their games, and I'm like, I hate the way you dungeon master. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You make me want to throttle you. I don't know why, but
I think it can also be important to realize that, like, a conversation I've had to have a few times is that there can be some, I'm not sure the right word. There can be some different, like, don't see eye to eye with people who are in the RPG hobby and people who play D&D. And so there's a lot of folks that like don't like D&D for whatever reason. Cool. But there's a lot of folks that like make it their mission to get D&D players to play other games, which is a thing that I do. I play D&D with people, and then, from that D&D pool, I also try to be like, hey, I'm really looking to play some Star Wars Fantasy Flight. Is that something you'd want to be interested in? So I definitely try to like recruit from my D&D pool for players, but there are some people that are just adamantly against D&D or X system or Y system, but like they think that everyone should play the system they want to play. And I think sometimes it's important to realize that in the RPG hobby, not everyone plays RPGs. They play what they're playing with their table in their house. So like there are people who don't play RPGs. They play D&D because on Sundays, them and their friends get together and they play D&D. They don't care about the rest of the systems out there because that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for that one thing they enjoy with their friends. And like I could go into that rant with like MMOs and stuff too. You had all these people who were like, blank is the superior MMO. What are you still doing playing WoW? I don't care about the other MMOs. Me and my friends play WoW, and that's where my character's at, and that's what I have fun doing, and that's what me and my friends do on Saturdays. So,
as a veteran World of Warcraft, God, I'm losing my ability to say World of Warcraft. That is how you speak, Ian. Use your professional radio voice. As a veteran player of that, as I actually started back in the beta days of the original vanilla WoW with my brother, me and him shared an account. And I've played Guild Wars 2, I've played EverQuest, I've played EverQuest 2, I've played both Final Fantasy games that were online. Out of every single MMO that I've played, I would say World of Warcraft is the superior if you're looking for, a very rich and long-running lore-based MMO. Something that has somehow remained constant and current compared to everything else. And D&D, in this sense, is kind of the same way. No matter what tabletop game you play, no matter what RPG you play, in some form or fashion, you can kind of draw the line back, it gets inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons. And like you said, not everyone's into D&D. Some people, They refuse to play one system or another. I refuse to play 4th edition. I will set my one book that I bought because I wanted to complete my collection. I'll set it on fire if, someone asks me to play 4th edition. I'll set your books on fire if you ask me to play 4th edition. But that's just how
that. Ian's not allowed in the house because there's 4th edition books.
It is heresy. Burn it, brother. That's another thing. I'm a system that I am terrified to jump into, but I'm kind of wanting to, is the Warhammer 40K system, because I've got a number of friends who are into the lore of it and everything. And I guess that's another question that we could ask or kind of contemplate. How much lore would the players need to know of the world that they're playing in order to, I guess, succeed or enjoy the campaign? So,
I saw that on your list, and I made several notes here. I did the dry erase board like in front of me so that I could remember, because again, see my voice recorder and notebook strategy. Like sometimes I think of really good stuff, and then on the spot I don't. And that was actually one of my favorite questions to come up with an answer for the stuff that you sent me, because I've bounced around a couple of different campaign settings, but I've also bounced around a couple of different rule settings, and sometimes with the same groups. And it's interesting to see how the same clump of people handle, okay, it's Forgotten Realms, or a Forgotten Realms like D&D 5e setting, like elves live in the woods, dwarves live in the mountains, it's fantasy, I got this. And then slop them over into Eberron or to Star Wars or to what, and to see the people who are like, I can't play that, I don't know any of the lore. And I think that the key distinction there is the feel that you're going for is obviously going to adjust, what you define as the player succeeding. So of course, what you're after is going to affect how much they need to know for you to win or to meet your goal. But I don't think that just, from an empirical measurement standpoint, I don't think the players need any lore up front with the right dungeon master.
That's true. And I'm very big for player agency and the fact, or the idea that my players help define the world that they play. So, like, I would often tell players, or ask players, like, hey, when you're writing up your character, why don't you tell me about the hometown he grew up, and where it would be located? And, I'd give them a map and, tell them some basic things about each kingdom and, the areas. And I'd let them decide where they were born, what kind of town they were born in, the family they were born in, and so on. Because
Right.
it gave them a bit more, investment into the world, but also helped them essentially get that basic mindset, that basic amount of lore that I know what this world is because my players lived in this world.
Right.
Or my characters lived in this world.
Yeah. I'll reference my Eberron games because I ran 2 one-shots in Eberron. It was the same one-shot twice, but I ran 2 one-shot Eberron games with literally no one who knew anything about Eberron. And so it was the perfect, like, primer for me to introduce people to my homebrew, because that would be the first time I was running a game where no one knew anything, right? And so some of the things that I really made notes of in the back of my head was, one, ahead of time, think of the things that the party is going to need to know for their mission or to succeed or what. So with Eberron, I knew that they wouldn't know anything, but based on the story we were talking about, knowing who the Lord of Blades was, sorry if you don't Eberron, but knowing who this one evil NPC was is important for the story that I'm trying to tell. So I needed to, like, have that be in my primer up front. But 2, as the game went through, I would look at the situation and see what bits of information I could give them, even if it didn't necessarily apply specifically to what they were trying to do. But I would try to think of things in the room that might remind them of something, because even though the player knows nothing about this world, the character has lived there, and so the character should have this knowledge. And so, hey, you're buying stuff from the goblins in the slums of this city. Okay, well, your character has been in the cities before and knows that goblins act this way. So I would try to think of things that while the party was role playing amongst themselves, that was my homework. Like, okay, what's going on around them, and, like, what do each of the characters know? And this leads into the next step, which is asking the characters for backstory that helps me tie them down to the world. So the characters are all standing in the slums, and there's a goblin trying to sell them a bunch of garbage he's collected from the sewers and whatnot. And so I start asking them questions like, hey, Daveris, is there any reason that whether you were in Sharn or another big city, like, that you would have come down here to the slummier side of towns to start dealing with these kind of folks before? Like, I know you smoke pipe weed and you have other addictions. Like, is this the type of spot you would come to make those air quote drug deals? Like, help me tie you to the story, but now that gives me a reason to say your character would know this information then. Your character would know this NPC then, because they've gone, yeah, in my backstory, my druid's totally from the swamp, so I would, I've probably spent, if not all of my time, then, I started there and I've probably come back over the years. Okay, cool. Then, since you live in the swamp, you now would be aware that there's 3 lizard folk tribes out there. Bam. I can give them lore based on a choice that they made, not something I just needed to read off a sheet to them.
Yeah. And that definitely does help a lot, with asking your players, like, what would your characters be known for in their past actions? One campaign I run, again, it's the crime campaign. One of the players is an inquisitor, He follows the god Modaris, the god of knowledge and all that stuff. And he plays it up, and he'll constantly, like, ask me, it's like, would my character reasonably know from his background as an inquisitor? And it normally takes me a moment or two, but I'm like, yeah, your character would have knowledge of this because of the nature of his job and what he's dedicated the last 30 years of his life to. So rooting out people in the slums and where they most likely hide, how to find, say, thieves' markings on the wall, he's familiar with all of that.
I think so. One of my earlier roll high, don't die topics was what is a moment where you had an epiphany or like you found your playstyle evolved, and several of the things that I've thought of since then that I could elaborate on that topic. One of the primary ones that sticks out is in my head as a GM, I've learned to be better about when I ask for a roll versus when I ask for like character backstory, especially on intelligence related skills. Yeah, I could ask for a history check and then they could roll a random number and maybe meet or maybe not meet the DC here. But if I can get information from them about their backstory and then go, yeah, that's a good enough reason to know this, I don't leave it up to random chance. I've helped tie the character down to the world. They've fluffed out their backstory more and the story moves forward. But like if there's some piece of information there, I don't want to like lock it behind, oh, well, sorry, you rolled a 7.
Yeah.
If it would have made sense that their character knew it. Like I hate when clerics make a religion check and roll a 2 and I have to be like, sorry, I know you know everything about, these 3 religions, but you've never even heard of this god. What? He's a cleric, man. Come on.
At times what I do is do what is called adjusted difficulty class. So for the rogue to, make a religion check when he obviously has no points into religion makes no sense. So the difficulty class for that would be much higher for the cleric than it would be for the cleric who, it's all about the religion. So I would say the rogue, it's at like a 20 because, he doesn't know anything about religion. He just never gave a thought to it. Meanwhile, the cleric, since he's dedicated so much time to it, I'd probably put it at a 5 or a 10, depending on whether or not it's in his pantheon or outside of it. And
so
I feel like... Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. One of the things that I talked about in a previous episode, and I'm terrible, and I don't remember what GM I was interviewing, and we were talking about it. We'll have a 2-parter here. So one of the things was going to other systems, learning from them, and then coming back to D&D or whatever your primary system is, and adjusting. And so, like, have you messed with Fantasy Flight Star Wars at all before?
A little. I don't like it.
Yeah, but you are aware that there's the pass-fail metric and then the advantage threat metric. Like you can succeed on a check, but bad stuff can still happen.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the Saga edition, which is more based off like the Fate system.
Yeah, right.
And the Star Wars D20 that apparently no one likes, and I don't know why.
That was my second RPG ever. I started in 3rd edition, and then the same group did Star Wars things in Star Wars D20. But
yeah, I learned the Fate system. I would have to say rather recently because the Star Wars fan club, our character sheets that we use for fiction and stuff are all based off the Fate system. So I had to learn it for something that we were working on. And
Fate is in my pile of I don't know anyone who wants to play it right now. I want to play it, so it's on deck, but must have some interest first because there are other things that I have clear interest for, like Genesis or Star Wars or Tales from the Loop that have racked themselves higher in my to-do list.
Well, I always play Rifts or GURPS, but that's only if you don't like yourself.
But what I was saying was, so I play other systems and I bring those things back to D&D because it's my home turf. And one of those things is having the 2 axes, and it's tough to do on a D20 system, but I try to keep that in mind. Like, yeah, you can jump the pit, comma, space, but blank. So yes, but and no, but are 2 things I tried to incorporate. But on top of that, like you said, DC's based on who's doing the check, but also information based on more DCs. Like, especially for knowledge stuff, don't just set the DC at 12 and 11 and lower is a fail and 12 or higher is a pass. Have some information that they can gain if they roll 10 or higher. Have, the good stuff at 12 and or some more stuff at 12 and the good stuff at 15, and then if they roll 18 or higher, have even more information that only based on some backstory or the perfect storm of events that they would have had, like, oh yeah, you happened to be in a library one time and read a book about this thing, so even though you didn't explicitly experience it, here's your reward for rolling super high. But they don't have to worry about this pass fail metric because you now have a gradient. Oh yeah, I know he's a god, and I know that like X, Y, and Z is the stuff that folks kind of associate with him, but I don't really know more beyond that. And then, okay, you rolled a 15. Yeah, this is the ideals of the church, and this is who they recruit, and blah. And then, okay, you rolled an 18. This is their goals. This is their, what they reverend. This is the days that they do stuff. A scale, basically.
I definitely like that. Like I said, I do the adjusted difficulty based off of like the character in particular, like who's rolling to check for this knowledge.
Right.
Because I'll often say it's like hey, there's a check. It's like do a history check to see if you know something, and then everyone that the whole table just rolls history versus the one person. I'm like, why are all of you rolling? I only asked for a history check from that guy.
Yeah, so I love that, and I love I want to make a perception check. Okay, yeah, you're the first one through the door, roll. I rolled a 3, and 4 other people immediately scramble for their d20s, and you're like, come on, guys, like, just because you know that he failed, like, doesn't mean that everyone needs to start flinging dice at me. Like, he's the one in the room.
I like I check for traps. All right, you don't see any traps. And it's like, okay, either there are traps and he's lying to us, or there aren't any traps and there's nothing to worry about. Everyone else, roll perception to search for traps just in case. And I'm like, oh my god, you're just crossing a 10 by 10 room! It's a living room, for Pete's sake, just go through!
I think one of the things in my toolbox, because I do a lot of teaching tutorial games, most of my in-person games are like, let's teach you D&D, because I normally like steal people from board game groups and then convert them to the dark side. One of the things I try to teach people who like see the thickness of the book and go, wait, I need to know all the rules before I can play. No, stop. You don't need to necessarily know all the rules, and you don't even need to know what your character can do in the sense of like, how does a history check? No. Tell me what you want to do, and I will tell you whether you even need to roll to do that, and if so, what you need to roll to accomplish that. But I try to get people out of that habit of, I want to make a perception check. No. Say what you're doing. Say you're looking around the room, and I'll say, okay, you see there's a couch, a table, and a TV, and the curtains are blue. Like, you don't necessarily need to come in here and say, I'm making a perception check and then roll dice, because when you roll an 18 and I tell you it's an empty living room, you detect nothing. And you're like, but I rolled an 18. Okay, like, I wrote this to be an empty room. You were supposed to walk through it and into the next room. Like, I'm sorry you wasted your 18 on the empty room, but if you had just asked me, I open the door, what do I see? I would have told you it's the living room and there's a door on the other side. And like, you didn't need to roll, so that's on you, not on me.
It's me. The video I did. Shoot, how long ago was it? Was called "Just Because You Rolled a 20." Just because you rolled a nat 20 does not mean suddenly, oh, there's traps. Oh, there's loot that you guys didn't see beforehand, or something. And it's like, just because you rolled a nat 20 does not change the laws of physics and nature itself. I, the Dungeon Master, have deigned this room to be a normal living room. It's not suddenly going to turn into a mimic fest or something.
Yeah. I don't mind when people have clown shoes and off the walls like adventures, and I am never going to tell anyone that like their fun is wrong if they and their whole group is having fun. Your fun might be wrong if somebody at your table is not having fun. But if you guys rolled a 20 and you think that that means the king is instantly your best friend because you rolled a 20 on a diplomacy check and it makes for a great story, have fun. But like, man,
He's still not giving you the crown.
number of memes and stuff that you see on Reddit and Twitter and stuff like that, where it's like, you rolled a 1, so you were stripped of all of your gear and thrown in jail for 5 years, and you're like, man, I just asked him the price of an apple. Like, why should a 1 mean that I tried to steal the apple? Like, let's not break reality, because that's a 5% chance on that die that either the worst thing ever is going to happen, or he sells you his entire apple cart for the cost of an apple. Like, no, man, come on. Like, a 20 has specific things that it does by the rules. And like, yeah, you can church it up a little bit, but like, in my game, let's keep 20s to doing what they do, and go nuts with your description. But like, again, the king's not gonna like knight you because you rolled a 20 on a diplomacy check to accept the quest. Like,
yeah, and like, I have to remind players every now and then. It's like, yes, you succeeded, but succeed within reason.
right.
Just because you're able to conjure, fire elementals from another plane of existence does not mean that you are all powerful, and that a success means total success. And then when the players, I've had those moments where the players are like, I'm gonna buddy up to the king and try and get a title of some sort from him. I'm like, okay, go ahead and try. Yeah, he likes you guys because you did him a favor, but at the same time, he's the king. He expects you to do it.
Right.
Yeah. He's more like patting you on the head, like, good job, thank you. Here's your money, now go away. He's the king. He doesn't care about you. But I think one thing that we have to keep in mind as Dungeon Masters and Game Masters is we have to balance what we expect with the expectations of our players. And I feel like session zeros, when we first get started up.
That is why session 0 is so important.
Yeah. It's like, what do you expect from this? What do I expect? What kind of theme do you want? What kind of end goal do you want?
It goes back to that, like, not necessarily every group is meant to be. Like, they may be your friend or whatever, but if you want different things out of the experience, it's not going to work out, or not going to work out optimally. And so session 0, or even if you don't have a session 0, you just have a group chat before the game kicks off or whatever, but that is your time to like set ground rules and set expectations and communicate. And that goes back to the biggest thing that most D&D or RPG groups really need to make sure that they focus on is communication among you and the group. And if you all communicate and are clear with each other, like, it'll work itself out.
Definitely. And
the best way to have a good session 1 is to have a good session 0.
Communication is... I work in a global communications company. Communications is key. A lot gets done when you just talk it out.
I work in the military, and I can tell you that if you cannot communicate with the other person, you're going to have a bad time. Whether it be the private sector, whether it be like joint communication, one branch of service talking to the other, or whether it's just like your shop talking to another shop who does another job. Like, if you can't figure out how to describe it in the words that they need it in, they're not going to care, man. But I digress. Don't get me started on work.
Oh, well, your work sounds fun and nice. Mine's just, people screaming about, how much money they made from investments and stuff.
My work has its ups and downs. I'm military, so it definitely has high points and low points. It's been a fairly fun adventure so far, and the last couple of years I lucked out, and I work with explosives as my primary job for about the last 10 years now. I'm not like the bomb squad. I'm normally If you want to think about it, I'm the guy who gave the bomb squad all of their stuff and who makes sure that, you know, it's inspected, it's good, it's, built up, whatever. I build bombs, I build rockets, I inspect TNT, all of that stuff is in my toolbox. Cool. Well, one of the special duties that I have is I can basically go be safety for my own career field. So I am currently safety to make sure all the people who have explosives don't kill themselves and everybody else. But
that's a good career.
not only did I get that job, I happened to get that job specifically on one of the Air Force's spaceports. So the East Coast has a spaceport and the West Coast has a spaceport, and I'm on the West Coast spaceport right now, which means that I don't just get to make sure that the bomb squad doesn't blow themselves up, but NASA and SpaceX and Blue Origin and Orbital ATK and United Launch Alliance and all those people who spend all day using a whole bunch of explosives to put things into orbit or on Mars or whatever, I make sure that they don't kill everybody. Turns out that there is actually rocket science involved in all of that. So my office right now is an entire office full of rocket scientists, and they speak all kinds of stuff that I don't know nothing about. And they're like, "Hey, this is Jim, and he works in ballistics engineering and instrumentation." And I'm like, "Okay." I make sure NASA doesn't blow up. That I'll be over in the corner. But yeah, I don't want to get too far off onto the weeds there, but it's the same role, like communications, right? You would not believe the amount of communication that it takes to put a freaking rover on Mars, but I was part of that process and can attest that, whether it's a game around your kitchen table or putting a rover on Mars, like if you are not all on the same page, if everyone's not using the same, units for their math, if everyone's not wanting the same things, then you're going to run into issues. So just keep that in mind with your games. The DM is the final rules adjudant, but like what the DM wants isn't necessarily the only thing that matters at the table. So yeah, DM, enjoy the fact that, it's your world and it's your game and you are the rules, judge, jury, executioner, but like you don't get to say it's my game, suck it, and expect that everyone's going to shut up and enjoy that. Like you need to communicate with your players, and if they don't like that, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to have people who resentfully do things to your game because they're not having fun. You're going to have people who quit because they're not having fun. You're going to have a bad time.
One of the key things that I constantly tell my coworkers is, reading's fundamental. Because a lot of like the profiles for our stuff, like I said, I work at a call center. Nothing fun with explosives. It's literally, oh hey, stocks went up 3% today. Yay. Stocks went down 3% today. No. But you'd be surprised how often we get the threat of, hey, we're going to take our business elsewhere if you screw up one more time. Like, okay, how'd someone screw up last time? They didn't read the comments. Great.
Yeah.
So that, communication is key as the same of like, hey, talking things out. But also, please, everyone, for the love of God, read the book. Read the player's handbook. Read the Dungeon Master's Guide. And you don't have to know it by heart. But at the same time, please read it.
I'll go into one last Reddit thread before I go, get off of here and go feed the wife. There was a Reddit thread that was... basically the question was, should you have to know the rules before you can DM? Should that be a prerequisite before you're allowed to run a table, is that you're at least good at the rules? And my answer is no, you shouldn't have to, but it still takes the right kind of mindset. Does knowing the rules make GMing easier? Yes. But again, like how many people got into the hobby because no one at the table had ever played before. They grabbed a starter set for whatever RPG that they were playing, and 5 people who were totally new sat down and you all stumbled through it together. Like if someone had to know how to play the game, we would have much less people playing the game.
Oh, I definitely
But
agree with that.
but on top of that, like DMs, read the book, learn the stuff, figure it out. Comma space, all caps, players, read the book, know what your characters can do, know what you want to do on your turn. Like, so many people put all of the weight on the GM and think that it's the GM's job to be the storyteller, be the rules like educator, but also the teacher, right? And as one of the rants I can go on is like, if my table moved to a new system, it would automatically be assumed that because I DM'd D&D that I would be running the new system, but on top of that, I would be teaching it to everybody. And it's like, well, wait a minute, guys. If we're going to a new system, I'm just as new as you are. We all have the book. Everyone start reading it and like at least know what your character could do. And that's one of the rants I had with like the Star Wars game. Like, hey, you guys can wait until I've read the whole book and like have it down solid, or you're the pilot. Maybe you should be the one that's reading how the starship combat works. And so that like I can focus on running the game and figuring stuff out, and you know that you can go, yeah, it's on this page, I've already looked it up. Blam. Cool. You helped me out. And again,
it's a group project.
Right. It's a group project. And so many people think that the GM is, like I said, the teacher, the secretary, the calendar maker, and with online games, the person who runs the stream and organizes all the stuff. And I think just as a hobby and as players, everyone needs to start going, wait a minute, if I spend the effort trying to wrangle all of these cats and get everyone to figure out the day and time that they're available, that's 3 more hours throughout the week that the GM can spend making the campaign better. If I'm the person who's running OBS and doing the stream and all that stuff, the GM can focus on GMing and I can be over there tweaking the sound levels and doing all that stuff. We don't have one person at the table trying to do all of the things and 5 people staring at them when things start going wrong. And so it's a group project. If you're not the GM, okay, maybe you're the host, maybe you're the snack guy, maybe you're the calendar coordinator, but like, don't be passive in your own experience, right? You're part of the game. Don't wait on the story to happen to you. Work with the GM outside the game and figure out your own backstory and you know, whatever it takes. But like, everyone should pull a little bit of weight, not just expect whoever's sitting behind the screen to provide a service. End rant. There's your OneCritWonder rant for the day.
The OneCritWonder rant for the day. I definitely agree, though, that like we both agree, it is a group project, and the more that everyone knows how the rules and everything works, the better. Especially with the Suriskin campaign, Kelker, who is now playing Isaac, he is I like to call the walking handbook because he is essentially my co-DM. If I am uncertain on a rule, I normally ping him and I ask him about it because he would know the exact page number, how the rule works, and everything about it. So it's like, oh, cool. You know, that helps me tremendously to have a co-dungeon master because I don't know all the rules. I could not possibly know all the rules. My brain just isn't that good. Words don't work that well, and memory is kind of fuzzy.
The first interview that I did for the actual interview process of the Roll High Don't Die project was with D4D&D, and they do co-DMs. And it's something I had seen before, but not something that I had really like gone into detail on or considered for my own channel or anything. But I really like the way that they have things set up, and I don't necessarily know anyone that I would immediately jump into it once I'm back from the desert and looking to start doing a game again. I don't have a co-DM in mind, but man, if anyone's listening or anyone's watching this once it goes on YouTube or whatever, and like you've not even heard of co-DMing, like spend a few minutes checking that out and seeing if that's something that works for you and your group, because I dig it. Like it wouldn't work for everyone, but like, man, as a person who GMs, like if there was another person on my team, sign me up.
Definitely. And like I said, it's super helpful for like if you're not familiar with all the rules, then either, you know, your co-DM will be familiar with the rules that you aren't familiar with, or better yet, the two of you together can figure out a essentially a fair ruling for the situation, and then proceed on with the rest of the game.
And that's one of the things that the two co-DMs of D4 D&D were talking about, is they both have their strengths and weaknesses, which is, it has two benefits there. One, all of the strengths and weaknesses don't necessarily line up, so each person's weaknesses have now been lessened by the fact that there's a strength person sitting next to them, and if he's the better person to deal with that, you can hang back for a second while they take lead. But on top of that, the things that you're both good at, you now have two people who are good at that thing and can really, like, knock it out. But on top of that, even further, just having two people there so that one person can kind of take a step back. Like I said, if the party goes off the rails all of a sudden, you can have somebody who starts doing stuff while the other person scrambles through the book or starts flipping to the random encounter tables or whatever they need to do, so you have two brains working in tandem.
Definitely. Oh, boy. We actually went over a little bit. Actually, more than a little bit, because we originally said just an hour.
Just an hour. We'll just do 2. Whatever. Like I said, all of these things I wanted to be an hour when I was doing my interviews, and I had to force myself to stop at an hour for 2 of them, and then we still talked in Discord after the fact, and the first one just went for an hour and a half on the recording, and I was like, ooh, my bad. But again, I don't mind. The wife might have some words, because I'm going to take her out for a steak dinner here in a minute.
Steak.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm always down to talk, and I'll be getting out of country here shortly. But once I get back, I would love to do more of these kinds of things. So don't be afraid to, fall-ish next year, start reaching out and be like, hey, you want to talk about a specific topic more in depth, or you want to just have another like open forum RPG social hour? Because I am always down. And
I'm definitely up for that as well. And I guess OneCritWonder would be, no, I'm sorry, the Roll High Don't Die is essentially what I wanted to do with the Dungeon Master's Corners that I've been doing. So I guess with Roll High Don't Die not being in production, since you're going to be out of the country, I guess I can try and see if I can stick my foot into place and kind of squeeze my way in there.
Yeah, and
I definitely want to get Paul from Swordfall D&D back on here. I want to see if I can get Wade from Not Quite Heroes, and a number of other dungeon masters out there. As like I'm looking at the at your Discord right now, and there's a number of like DM names that I don't recognize, and it's like, man, these are people I need to find out more about.
Yeah, so it was originally just I had a couple of folks that I gave the role to, but now I'm acquiring more, and there's a few more folks who don't have the RPG content role, but they're like a player in one of the streams or stuff. But again, for anyone listening, once I put this on YouTube, there will be a link to the Discord and stuff like that, and I definitely try to make a community where people can cross promote. So since you are now on my Discord, Paul from Swordfall's on there, the folks from Roll Initiative, there's several folks who were trying to do the exact thing we're doing right now. So do not be afraid to plug your own content on my Discord. That's what it's there for, and there are channels specifically for it. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out, because the DM supergroup that I talked about, Notorious DMG, like that basically got started more or less on my Discord, because several folks who were all independently looking to do that kind of thing bumped into each other and started it. So
mine is not really fear, it's more of anxiety.
Yeah, well, again,
Are you anxious? Yes, I'm always anxious.
Use humor or whatever it need be, or if you want me to reach out to folks, like, don't be afraid to shoot me a message, and I'll be a social networker, because I like connecting people, and that's one of the reasons I started doing the one shots that were just 4 or 5 players from random channels, is because it's better for everyone. And I could have a whole episode on like strategies for content growth or whatever, but as an RPG content creator, think about that. Don't think about other channels as competition so much as, hey man, if I do a project with them and all of their fans are watching it, all of their fans are going to see me, so I don't have to wait on onesie twosies to see me on Twitter or Twitch or whatever. All of their fans immediately see who I am and what I do. So those one shots where I had, Maddie Morgs, who does RPG workshops, and the DM of Defenders of Kobold, and the DM of Legends Die Live, like, those are several communities that have now rubbed elbows because I forced them to make a cult about a chicken.
Well, that's definitely one way to get people to work together. I'm gonna steal that cult of the chicken thing, just so you know. Especially since I met a player recently who had a chicken man. I think he was like a gnome luchador named El Pollo Loco. So
that makes complete sense based on my experiences with D&D.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to steal that chicken cult for a later time. But nonetheless, thank you very much for joining me here on the Dungeon Masters, as well as allowing me to essentially contaminate Roll High, Don't Die with my friend.
No worries. Apologies about the fact that I have two accounts and two brands, as it were. It's just that OneCritWonder is kind of my everything pile. So you're gonna get your puns, you're gonna get memes and silly stuff that I do. And so Roll High, Don't Die is so that if you're looking for the specific like workshops and topics and stuff like that, you don't have to put up with my like, oh god, he made another null pun. So that's the difference there. Is my YouTube might be me playing Borderlands, my Twitch might be me playing random games or whatever, but like if you're looking for explicitly creative content creation, that's why I double branded, is so that I can, like you said, I cannot contaminate my own product, basically. We're like, who's this guy and why is he, playing Doki Doki Literature Club on his D&D stream?
Yeah, I think with me, it's like, I'm no longer just going to be Dungeons and Dragons, going to remain a huge staple of my channel and all of my stuff, but I'm wanting to branch out to other things. I mean, my logo, for Pete's sake, has a gamer controller and a Stormtrooper helmet on it.
Right.
There's other parts to me, so I'm wanting to bring those more to the fore.
I'm by no means like a big name at all, but if you ever want to talk shop, don't be afraid to reach out on Twitter or even personal message on Discord or whatever, and be like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. Any experience with that? And I'll talk about experiences if I have them, and I'm always looking for an excuse to do research. But that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing right now too. Like, yeah, I play a lot of D&D, but like, wait a minute, if I'm one of the first channels streaming the Stranger Things starter set, that's going to be traffic because I'm the first channel doing it, or I'm the only channel running this obscure RPG. So anyone who runs the starter set for it is probably going to Google those words. Hey, they found me. So those kind of
I'm actually pretty happy about this. But if you were to go to Google right now and you type in D20 Sunday, my channel comes up. And I'm actually really happy about that, considering I've only got like 154 subscribers. But if you were to go over and just type in D20 Sundays, I'm the first one that comes up. And
Nice.
the only one that comes up. And I'm actually super happy about that.
OneCritWonder still has like random League of Legends stuff, but I'm slowly working on taking it over. But I digress. I do thank you for having me on here, and I do thank everyone that came by and was hanging out in both of our Twitch channels and stuff. But I'm gonna sneak on out of here and go feed the missus.
All right. Catch you later. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.